In the previous tutorial video, we completed the GUI design for the sending greetings app that we have developed. So far, it's not really completed just yet, I mean for the entire app, because if we launch the app using some emulator, and then if I simply type some name, for example, Alan over here, and let's say we choose Mr. over here, right? GUI components are working perfectly. However, if I say greetings over here, nothing's happening over here, right? So we haven't really got the programming logic implemented yet and connect to the GUI. So that's what's missing, and we're going to do it now. However, let me move the GUI away, I mean the emulator away. But before I actually do the controller, for this particular app is rather easy, but I would like to just recap very quickly about the important things you really want to pay attention to when you do your own GUI design. You don't want to miss any detail over here. Let me double click on the activity_main.xml. So it always is under the resources subfolder under layout. Okay. If you click on that, let me now go to the design view over here, design. And then we got how many GUI components do we have, right? According to our design, we actually got 1, 2, and 3. So there are three text views GUI components. And also we got one plain text or text field. And also we got one spinner or drop down menu. We also got one button of it, all right? So we got so many. And for each one of them, they do have a unique ID you have to set, right? Let's now look them up very quickly because we need those in the controller, okay? Especially the one for input and output. Let me just say for the name over here, you can see the ID is label name. Always got a label prefix over here just for convenience. If you got your own naming convention, feel free. But I think if you're in the labs, if you are given a particular, let's say, if you're given a particular activity file, it might assume certain ID, so you don't want to change them, right? So it depends. Okay, for this one here, it's simply label name, and also you can see this one is label title, different ID, and this part over here is label output, right? You can see these three. Specifically for the I'm going to copy down the IDs for the input, output, and also the button, right? For the labels, I don't need to copy them down. They are not really relevant to my discussion. So I got label output over here. So I'll simply just put it down. Okay, you can do the same thing here. So this is the label output ID, right? Which will be useful later. Okay, and then let me go back here. What about input over here? You can see this one here is input name, and this one here is the options titles. So this will be input name, and this will be options titles. Those are the ID. And finally, you can see for the button here, so this one has the ID button say greetings. Okay, button say greetings. Okay, so I just wanted to let you know, you really can connect. You can think about these IDs are basically the implementation artifacts in the Android Studio. However, this part here graphically just your graphical design on the paper, right? But they are connected after the previous video. All right, so now we would like to see how we can make the app work by touching the controller. Okay, so that's what we should do. And I'll talk about the separation between controller and also GUI at the end of the current video. We'll see. All right. Let me first of all go under Java, go under EECS1022 tutorial greeting, and go to main activity. So that's the file you will need. Okay, double click on that. All right. So currently we simply got only a single method over here. You don't need to worry about the protected over here. So that's why we don't really want to introduce too much about Android Studio for this course. So Android Studio actually assume a mature knowledge about OOP and also Java. For example, protected is something to do with inheritance, but for this course, we wouldn't touch upon it. For now, you can just take it for granted. If there's any modification you would need, I'll tell you explicitly. Otherwise, take it for granted. I'll tell you exactly where you need to modify. However, what you need to be responsible for will be the model package, which we will introduce in the second app. So that will also let you get another opportunity to really practice your OOP skills, which is really the main learning outcome for this course. All right. Okay, for this particular onCreate method over here, it is whatever lines of code that's under this method here simply means when you launch your emulator, when you launch your app, so these lines of code will be executed. Simply leave them the way it is. We might need to modify just slightly, just adding more lines in the second app, but I will show it to you. But all you gotta remember is, let me put a comments over here, right? So the way you do comments will be very similar as before. Okay, let me just use a single line. That'll be okay. So what you type should be also valid syntax, right? As you did in Eclipse. So this method is invoked when the app is first launched. Okay, that's really important to note. And then we'll add more lines in the second app, not for the current one. All right. And now, before I introduce the actual main method, the actual control method, I would like to talk about 3 helper methods that you can actually take. You can actually assume. Let me simply put them one by one, and then I'll explain briefly the intuition behind them, but you don't need to worry too much about defining them yourself. You can always just copy and paste these 3 helper methods. Helper method number 1, I already copied, so that will be helper method number 1. As soon as you, I'm going to include a text, either maybe on the YouTube video description. You can look for them, all right? And the first one, as soon as you copy and paste, if you move your mouse over the view, you should really say import class, because the view must be imported. It's a library class. If you say that, you can see now under, you can expand the import, you can see the view is there, right? And also move your mouse over text view and also say import class over here. So now no compilation error, right? I'll explain this in just a moment. Just bear with me. That's the first helper method, right? So we basically say there are 3 helper methods you can assume. Just copy and paste. Second one, I'm also copying that. You can also copy from the YouTube description. Okay. So the second one is getInputOfTextField, and then we simply move the mouse over and then say import class, right? And then that's good. Okay. The final one I would like to copy and paste is this. The final one is this. All right, move my mouse over spinner and then import class. All right, let me explain very quickly about every one of them. Each one of them is really having similar logic. Okay, basically this method over here. Okay, let me just now. Okay, this mutator, you can see mutator is returning void, right? We learned about void. This mutator sets the output label. For example, what do we have any output label? We do. This will be some label output exactly over here. Okay, so whenever you want to set the output label you have defined, so there will be setContentsOfTextView of text view, right? Remember the text view that we added, right? You can see we got actually text view over here. We got text view over here. We also got text view over here. But this is the one you want to set as the output text view. That's why its ID will be so important. Label output, right? So the argument should pass will be the ID for that particular GUI components. So that will be the label output that I just spoke about, right? You can see label output. That's why you should really specify over here to say I want to display on this text view some specific text, and the text I'm gonna specify will be just newContents over here, right? Exactly what these 3 lines are really doing is simply just trying to make some library call, but you don't need to worry too much about them, right? You just have to know how to use them. And even for this expression over here is something called typecasting. However, it's too advanced. You will only learn about typecasting for objects in 2030, so you don't need to worry for now. So just take them for granted. All you need to know is whenever you want to set the output, like a system and other print line, something like that, you want to set the output into some label, some text view. This is the method to call. All right. The second method would be this. The second method will be, you can see, let me just undo it. The second method you can see, this returning not void is an accessor. Okay, so this accessor retrieves the input that you enter in the text field, right? So where do we have text field? Whatever input you actually put in the text view over here, that's what I call the text field. If you enter Jackie over here, then you can retrieve by ID. So if you pass the ID for this particular text field, which is input name, then you will be able to retrieve whatever that's entered over here by the user. Okay. Okay. So this will be retrieves input enter on the text view. Identified by the ID, right? You gotta pass the ID, right? And again, whatever I put over here, you can take it for granted. All right. And the third method here is another accessor. You can see again, it's returning string. getItemSelected. So this is actually for spinner. You can see we see some spinner over here, right? So this accessor retrieves input chosen from some spinner, and whenever we say spinner, it's a drop-down menu. All right, and you can see, for example, by passing the ID for this particular spinner, options titles. In that case, I can choose. I can retrieve either the user chose Miss or Mr. Right? Let's see exactly how that works. All right, so these are the three helper methods. You should really, you can simply take them for granted. You don't know exactly how they're implemented. You just want to know when to use them. That's the most important thing, right? I've defined a helper method for your convenience. Okay, finally, so this will be the important controller method. Controller method to be attached to some GUI components. Okay, let me just, you can put the comments over here. I'm going to visualize exactly the relationship between GUI and also the controller in just a moment. But for now, let's define the method. Let's now define some method here. Typically, the method will just be void, mutator. So we'll say public void. And then we're going to specify whenever, for example, here, typically you will have to specify the controller method for every button. So whenever the user click on the button, so that means some computation must be done in order to compute whatever input that has been chosen by the user and then produce an output back to the mobile screen. That will be the workflow that we have to program. So now we only got one particular button here. So we want to create one. You can think about once we define some method in the controller, in the activity class, it can be attached to this particular button. So whenever this particular button is clicked, so that means this method will be triggered to be executed. So that's the relationship. So we want to attach whatever method we define into to this particular button. That's what we should do. Let's now declare the method first, and then we'll implement it. So let's say public void. Let me just say compute, right? The name is really up to you. I can say compute, and then I can say button say greetings, right? So that's kind of the ID, just reminding myself, right? Button say greetings. Of course, the ID should be lowercase, but for the name, I'm just using compound words. So compute button say greetings and clicked. Typically, the final word over here should be clicked. So that means whenever the button is clicked, this method here should be executed. But in order to do it, we want to attach this method to the corresponding button. Okay, and then the way you define it should always be some view over here. Okay, that's the this is some part you also have to take for granted for Android specifics. Okay. All right, so now once the method is declared, let's now go back to the GUI right away, right? We want to make, the only thing we have to change is for this particular button, we want to say whenever the user click on that, some method attached to it must be executed right away as an event. It's called event-driven programming, which I'll speak a little bit more in a moment. So now you click on this GUI here and then go to the search over here and then simply search for click. All right, you will see the last one here on click. upon clicking on this particular button here, we want to make sure we execute some method. So we want to add it explicitly. This is the most important step for you to do, right? Once you declare the controller method from the activity file, you want to make sure you add it to the corresponding GUI button right away, right? So now I can choose, right? So that's the method I just declared, right? As soon as I declare that in the activity, it will be available for me to choose on click. All right. Okay, once I choose it, good. And let me go back to main activity over here. So now I need to program the logic, right? So the logic is very simple. The logic will be, I want to retrieve this particular input by its ID over here. I want to retrieve the choice by the ID for the spinner, and then I will actually concatenate these two strings together to produce the greeting message. And then the greeting message is going to be displayed on this particular text label. That's what's going to happen, right? And all these actions will be encapsulated into the method that will be attached to this particular button click. That's really what we're doing. All right, let's now do it, and I'll still visualize to you at the end. So what I would, first of all, I want to retrieve. So I can say string, let's say name. Text name will be fine. Okay, always put a text, right? So that's kind of, in the case, it's actually retrieved from the GUI text view. Will be. So now which method should I call, right? So now I'm trying to retrieve basically from the text field, right? So I would say retrieve, copy the name of the method, and then, so that one there is going to, I need to pass the ID, right? So this is how you should write it. R, standing for resource, dot, ID, dot. So these are all the labels that we declare from the design, right? So which one should we choose? So it should be the input name over here. Just verify input name over here. All right. Choose that one. Oh, sorry, I missed it. Dot, input name. Choose it, right? You just want to make sure you call the right method, helper method. So that will be the name. What about the title? I can say string title, text title. Will be, which one should I call? Will be getItemSelected over here, right? So I can get getItemSelected, and then I need to specify the ID. So that'll be r.id dot. So now which one should I choose? Which one tells me the option that's being selected? Which one tells me the spinner ID? So it should be options titles, right? Click on that. Just remind you, you can see that's the one. Options titles over here. Choose it. That will be either Mr. or Miss, right? Either one. So now we got both inputs. You can see now the input over here, Jackie. So the input over here, the input right here has been stored into text name. And the input over here, whatever, either one, not both, has been stored into text title. So we got these two variables, and now what should be the greeting message? It should be hello, comma, title concatenated with the text name, right? And then we want to make sure we display that into display to this particular label with this ID. That's what we'll do. So what we'll do now is we can, let me just put another one. Let's say string greeting message is assigned to, we can say hello plus whatever the title, text title it is, plus maybe some space, plus text name. Okay, for this particular app, we don't really need to create any objects. It's just simple string concatenation. But the main learning outcome for this the first simple app is really to learn about IDs for the GUI components, how to define controller method, how to use the private helper methods, and also how to attach the controller method to the GUI component. That's the main learning outcome. We will introduce about model package for the second app. So we want to do one step at a time. All right, so that's a greeting message. And now finally, what we should do is, so let me just document this precisely, okay? Retrieve input values from GUI components. And the second step over here is do computations based on the retrieved inputs. For the second app, we're going to follow the same principle. Finally, the third step is always sequential, and then we do let's say display output on the text view. So you can see it's a little bit similar to how we develop a console application. So if you remember in back to the very beginning of the semester, I talked about there are different ways you can visualize your programming effects. Either you can use console application, or you can use mobile app, or you can simply use JUnit test. Either way, right? All right. Finally, which helper method should we call? It should be the first one over here, setContentsOfTextView over here. All right. So when we want to set an output label, and we want to identify the ID and also the contents, right? What should be the ID? The ID should be the ID for this particular button, which is button say greetings over here. Let's go back here, and then call this method here, right? And then it will be the ID. So r.id dot. So we should really choose button say greetings over here, right? So we're basically the first argument and the second argument should be the greeting message, right? You can see greeting message. Okay, I can maximize it. Okay. All right. Hopefully, so far you're following, right? The only complication we're gonna introduce later, either for the second app or maybe for the your future labs, will be you just have to create some objects over here, which I will show to you. Okay, but for now, that's good enough. All right, we are done. So why don't we simply, if you have already stopped your app, you can simply just relaunch again. Otherwise, I don't need to stop. I can simply click on Apply Changes and Restart Activity, right? If I click on that, and then I go back to my Android tablet over here. Okay, I believe it's now being relaunched over here. Okay, let me try this. What if I say Jackie over here, and then I chose Mr. over here. If I say greetings, hello, Mr. Jackie over here. However, it's really, you know what? I said the wrong thing, right? It's changing the button. It's not changing the text message. You know what? It might be a nice thing, which I didn't intend it, but it's nice to show to you. The problem is, I set the button say greetings. That's not the right thing to show. I should set the label output over here, right? But you know, I think that's kind of an interesting mistake I made. Things will still compile. It's a logical mistake, right? You can see I shouldn't really just change the button over here. That's not what I intended, right? All right, let's go back. All right. But it's kind of nice, right? That nice app. Let me go back here. So now the only thing I gotta change is the ID over here. I'm still calling this helper method over here, but I'm gonna say r.id dot. It should be label output over here, right? Hopefully you see. You know, I think explaining this mistake might strengthen your understanding maybe slightly more. Okay, and I'm going to click on Apply Changes. Let me go back to the app over here. Very good. Okay, now if I still type Jackie and Mr., say greetings, hello, Mr. Jackie. Okay, let me try again. Hyang over here, and then I can choose Miss. Say greetings, click on the button, hello, Miss Hyang. Okay, why don't we try more? Try one more. How about Suyang over here, also Miss. Say greetings, hello, Miss Suyang. Hopefully you get a point over here.